Sandia, how many friends did you have? And hey, Marty, what's up, right? I mean, and those make you feel good. And that high school's not for everybody. I'm not saying that everybody had the same experience, but I think a lot of those social interactions the kids are really missing out on, being in school and being in sports and being in the DECA club, the chemistry club, with the band, whatever it is they do.
I look back when I was back in high school. I loved going down D wing. That was what we call a D wing there in Sandia. But the fact that we could, you could talk to the good looking cheerleaders and the girls and the guys and talk about what happened at practices the day before or what's going on with the new classes and homework. And you got to have that interaction, Ed. And these kids are not getting it. And you're right, they're missing something big. And that woman from Texaco, where she's a throw to the Texas border, right across the border, there's a little town, and they're having all the basketball practices, and they're all enjoying their lives.
Farwell, Texas. Farwell, Texas is about a mile away
from Texas.
Yeah, from Texaco.
And if you lived in Lovington, New Mexico, you just go across the line. There's a town called Denver City, Texas, and they're having sports, they're having classes, and they had not had any positive COVID. And then you go to Clovis, New Mexico, 22 miles away, 8 miles to the Texas border, 22 miles to Muleshoe, Texas. Now, Muleshoe, Texas is famous for the OU football coach, Lincoln Riley. That's where he went. But they're playing basketball games, and they're doing all this stuff in the classroom, but we're not. So the virus doesn't stop at the border, and it just doesn't.
Well, and that's not to say, again, I want to make sure everybody understands where I'm coming from. That doesn't say that the virus hasn't broken out in those places. It has, but thank God they've been able to still maintain and move forward. They've still been able to do sports and do the activities. Thank God. Now, I think for me, I'm hoping that there's hope right now. They're talking about maybe March. And you know what? Here's my opinion. I told you this before. It's not enough to sit there and just say no, right? Can we talk about it? Is there a way we can do it safely? First, the kids need to be back in school. You and I are big advocates of school first, then athletics. And they were talking about maybe returning back to school in late January, which I think is great news. Now, if they can return to school, can they do sports? Now, these are questions because hopefully the answer is yes, if things can be done safely. I'm not ignoring the virus or saying it doesn't exist. We didn't say that, but I still think it can be done safely. I hope it can be, because you mentioned the kids being, let me give you an example. The Texaco head coach was telling me that some of her best students are struggling with online learning. Some of her best students. What does that tell you? What does that mean for the students that are on the margins, the ones that struggle in class? How are they doing? So, again, we're talking about maybe a 1 to 3 year learning gap. I'm just guessing. I don't know if that's true. But being in school has its advantages more than its disadvantages, and just the socialization and learning. So I'm hoping that in late January, again, I'm saying safely. I'm not just saying throw them back in school. Plans, how can they come back to school safely? And then if that happens, we have to give people reason to hope, Marty. Now the governor has locked things down and locked them down, and we've adhered to those lockdowns. There's nothing else we can do. But if you're the governor of the state of New Mexico, you're the governor of all the citizens, right? You have to give people reason. You're saying, how many vaccines are out there now? 3, right? Now, that doesn't mean everybody gets vaccinated tomorrow and it's over. We didn't say that either. But there's hope around the corner. So if you're the governor and people are having these lockdown mentalities where they're depressed, tired, they want hope. And I think it's up to you to say, at least let's talk about it to see if it can be done. What can we do? Instead of saying no, and no some more. You can't keep doing that and hope to succeed politically if you want to run for re-election in 2022. You have to start putting some political points on the board. And I would think there has to be at least a reason to say things are going to be better here or here. That's you got to give people hope. That's just my opinion.
So there was an article in the Albuquerque Journal, and I saw something in the Santa Fe newspaper. I think it was Friday or Thursday. Maybe it was Thursday. And and I got off the phone with one of my good friends, Carl Hawkins, who you
Oh
know
yeah,
that you did right. And
yeah.
we had a conversation, Ed, and I think you ought to join us on this one. We're real concerned only 30% of the vaccines been executed, and other states are up at 55, 65 on the original batches. And so that really concerns me that the vaccine's not getting out there fast enough to these people. Now maybe that's going to change here the first week of January, and that's something you and I should follow, how many of these vaccines are getting to the people, the vital people. Now I just signed up last night, and my other half did too. So hopefully I'm on the list. I know you're going to sign up with your wife, but I'm real concerned. Now that was Thursday, 30%. Now, maybe those numbers are better, but that's not good compared to Oklahoma and Colorado and Texas. They're over 55%, out there. So employing the vaccine. So what's your thoughts on that, Ed?
Well, you know what? I had a conversation with Senator Jerry Ortiz Pino on the radio on Sunday, and we talked about New Mexico's unique challenges. You got Sandoval County, Dora County, Fairfax County. There's so many. New Mexico has its own the reservations, the rural areas of New Mexico. But I think the point you make is a good one, because on the federal level, they had wanted to do 20 million vaccines by the end of the year. They were only at 4 million. So it's one thing to sit there and say, we've got all these vaccines. How do they get into arms? How do you get the shots into arms? So something's got to give here. And you know what? Carl Hawkins, who's I haven't talked to Carl since we did. He's a smart guy. Carl's a real smart guy. Somebody I have a lot of respect for.
Now, he works with the medical hospitals. He works with these companies. So he's just so you know, Ed, he's on top of it. So it's something that when we do our next show, I think what we ought to do when we do our next show next week, find out, I think that's something we need to follow, you and I, how much the percentage, because if they're not getting out fast enough, that's going to get people upset. So I think it's something that we need to look at and follow here, especially in the first 2 or 3 weeks in January. Don't you think, Ed?
Well, yes, and they said it in Florida the other day. There was some confusion because they told seniors show up. There's lines, for 3-4 hours, and people in line. And one senior gentleman said that he didn't get a shot, and nobody talked to him, and no communication. And look, here's the thing, right? The president did a good job with the warp speed, and they did a good job in developing that vaccine. Nobody has done it that quick, although there's still some questions, and people have questions, and I understand that. But then what's the plan after that? We've got these vaccines. To me, there's got to be A to Z, right? And to me, there's got to be very little wiggle room, margin for error in getting these things. Okay, that's number one, is the vaccines out. That's good. How do we get them out? And then if people are saying they're not getting out fast enough, to me, that's inexcusable. That's poor planning. And I don't know if it's at the Fed level and at the state level you were mentioning. So they've got to do better. Something's got to give.
Well, now this, so you know, Ed, it's really, once they get it to the state, it's how they deploy it. Now, let's talk about the state of Kansas, the state of Arkansas, and the state of Missouri. Guess what they did, Ed? They brought out the National Guard to help do the deployment of the vaccine, to get it out to the people. Maybe we need to do that, especially down in some of these remote counties like Hardin County, Catron County, some of these counties.
Oh, yeah.
And now maybe the governor, she should listen to talk to these other governors, because when they get it to you, you got to deploy it out there. Now they're using the National Guard. I'm not saying we have to use the National Guard, but I think it's an option to get this thing out fast enough. I think it's something somebody should take a look at. Don't you think?
Now, that's a good point. Now, when I talked to Senator Ortiz Pino on Sunday, he was mentioning to me that a doctor has to be on hand for these vaccines to be, when they're, when the shots get into arms, a doctor has to be there. So volunteers can't just do it. And I don't know if that brings up another issue, if there's enough doctors to be on hand when those shots are given. So, no, I think you should deploy every resource that you can in a national, this is a global pandemic, right? It's what has it done to our country? What has it done to the world? It's done, it's wreaked havoc. And so, yeah, if you've got,
I'm just saying, other states because when it gets into our hands, we've got to be able to deploy it. So now that's something that we're going to follow on American Talk It Up. I think that's something that's a good subject for us to follow up in the next every issue and every episode. Okay, because I think it's going to be the key of getting sports back, and that's so vital for you and I because we love and report on sports. So it's going to be vital. Of course, I told you I think the state should give every teacher a vaccine as a priority so the kids can go back. So that's another issue. But right now, I think it's something that we can follow. And I just wanted to bring it up on this episode. And I know you and I are going to be on top of it. And that's a story I'm going to really follow how this thing goes. Right, Ed?
Well, you know what? Yes, we should be on top of that. It's America Talk It Up. That's an American issue, a world issue. So
Yes.
the faster we get these things out, you know what? The better it is going to be, again, for the health of what did they say the goal was to get 75%, 80% of people vaccinated so the virus doesn't have a place to hide. Now, there's going to be those people, Marty, that were anti-vaxxers before this happened that will never get it, that don't want any part of it. So we'll have to see about that. But yes, if we got the vaccines, they said, now you heard about this too, Marty. This is important to talk about. There was a doctor that contaminated doses on purpose. He went to jail. Now, a pharmacist, I can't remember where, but they asked him, he was on Good Morning America today, they showed it, and they said that I guess he was a conspiracy theorist. He thought it was going to part of the DNA. I don't know what he thought, but when my wife and I was watching that, I said, why would anybody do that and contaminate them on purpose? And although that's a rare case because everybody else in the health field, now Jimmy Tran, our great director, I always respect his opinions. He's made some points about the anti-vaxxers. I understand that. But there's also people that have said, yes, Dr. Fauci, others that have been pro-vaxxers and said, you can trust this. We've had politicians. Mike Pence got one, Vice President Mike Pence, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, President-elect Joe Biden got it. So I think those are things you can look at and say, well, if they got it, maybe I trust it a little bit more. Although there's people right now, Marty, let's be honest, that don't trust any politician at all. Let's be honest about that.
So the CDC says that if we can get the country vaccinated by 75%, they call it a herd mentality, where it's going to pretty much shut it down. They call it herd mentality, the majority of the country. So I guess the aim is to shoot for 75%. That's what they're trying to do. Obviously, it would be better if they did 90%, but they figured 75% would really make a difference what's going on with the virus control. So we'll follow it. It's something that you and I are going to follow here. And hey, listen now. Hey, I've got to mention our sponsor, Everguard Roofing and Solar. I want to mention Gecko's, our restaurants, Rudy's Barbecue. These places need to be supported. And the Lava Rock Brewery and the Lava Rock has a great menu. So Lava Rock out there on Coors. We've got Extreme Cleans. If you need your house clean or carpet clean, check those guys out. And of course, I just want you to know, you want to check a website called Route 66 Takeout on the Mother Road, and I think it's route66takeout.com, and they have all sorts of discounts you can do. So anyway, with that saying, we want you to support our sponsors. And of course, we want to thank ProView Networks for putting this show on Comcast 26. So with that saying, Ed, let's talk about the hot news right now. You notice I've got Ohio State and you've got the Bama. But before we get into the national playoff championship game that is going to be played this coming Monday, let's talk about the NFL and the playoffs. So you've got a list of the games we're having. I guess we're going to have a triple header for Saturday and Sunday. So what's the first game being played on Saturday?
You got the Indianapolis Colts will take on the Buffalo Bills. That's the first game. Then you've got the LA Rams will take on Seattle. And then the nightcap, the Washington football team will take on Tampa Bay. And then Washington's important to note, sneaking in at 7-9, one of the worst records in the playoffs. Had played some good football near the end of the year, and they won the NFC East by beating Philadelphia on Sunday. So that's the last game on Saturday. And then Sunday, You've got Chicago versus New Orleans, Baltimore versus Tennessee, and Cleveland in a rematch of the game last week, Marty, will take on Pittsburgh.
So let's talk about the first game on Saturday. The Indianapolis Colts playing the Buffalo Bills. Is that the
You know
first
what?
game?
I think Buffalo, you and I mentioned, they played very well all year long. We talked about the great Bills teams of the 90s. I'm not saying this team is that good, but head coach Sean McDermott has done such a great job with their defense there. Josh Allen, the quarterback, is playing very well. So I've got Buffalo, but I've got to say this too. Indianapolis snuck in the playoffs. They made it last week. And I think a lot of people thought that Phillip Rivers was done and he leads the Colts to the playoffs. He had a pretty good season. But the game's up in Buffalo. Oh man, I'm gonna take Buffalo in that game. I think it'll be a I don't know about the final score, but I think Buffalo's too much for them there. I'll call it Buffalo 28-17 over Indianapolis on Saturday.
That's what I would do. Josh Allen is right now is the hottest quarterback in the league, I think, at this point. Don't you think?
He's played. You know what? And I feel bad again for all the fans in the NFL, but some of the Buffalo fans are some of the die-hard fans in the league. They they've never won a Super Bowl. They've been to 4, but their fans in Buffalo have been die-hard followers of that team for years, since they were back in the American Football League when O.J. Simpson, Joe Ferguson played for them, the Electric Company, Reggie McKenzie, when he used to block for O.J. Simpson. They've been big fans of the Bills for years, and it's a shame that right now the fans can't see them. But I think the Bills take that game, and I think they'll advance and they'll beat Indianapolis.
Well, Indianapolis has that great running back from Wisconsin. Is it Taylor?
Yes, I think he rushed for 250 on Sunday.
253, and then of course Rivers is one of the best quarterbacks to play in the game in the last 15-20 years. So they can put some points. Now the thing about Josh Allen, you're talking about a guy, this is his 3rd season in the National Football League, but talking about the most improved quarterback from year 1 to year 3. Now I would say now he got drafted right behind Baker Mayfield and Donald. What's the kid from the Jets from the USC?
Sam Darnold.
Yeah, so he was the 3rd quarterback taken, but of the 3, I think he's made the most improvement. Now when we saw him play for Wyoming against the Lobos, Bob Davies, who was the Lobo coach at the time, said he was back when he was a junior, he was going to be a star in the NFL. Now we didn't believe him, but I was on the sideline when the Lobos played Wyoming 2 or 3 years ago. And man, I saw this kid. This kid's really impressive. He's big, he's strong. He could probably throw a ball 70 yards, no problem. So his biggest problem was his accuracy. Now he's gone from 45% to 73% or 76% accuracy. That's big. That's over the last 3 years. So I think the big thing with him, he's mature. He knows how to look for the 2nd, 3rd receiver, and his accuracy's gotten better. And that was the knock when he was at Wyoming.
You know what? His rookie season was not good. He didn't have a very good rookie season. And since then, and remember, they've got a defense that gets turnovers, flips the field, gives them short fields to work with. Diggs, the receiver, has been very good for him. And I think their confidence has grown with each win. I really do. Remember the game that they lost to Arizona was on a Hail Mary from Kyler Murray to DeAndre Hopkins. Otherwise, they would have won that game. That was probably a pretty fluky loss that the Bills lost that game. But you know what? This is a formidable team that might be able to we'll have to look down the line, challenge Kansas City for the AFC championship. We'll have to see, though. There's a lot of football to be played. And one thing I love about it, even though the Dallas Cowboys aren't in it, I watch the NFL playoffs religiously because you don't know what's going to happen. You have no idea what's going to happen. So I think there's some good games this Saturday. We'll go to the other ones here in a second, but I've got Buffalo in that game for sure.
I got Buffalo winning by maybe 2 touchdowns, but I think Indianapolis is playing pretty close. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I might be wrong, but I think it's going to be a lot closer, maybe 2 touchdowns. Let's talk about the second game.
Second game is the LA Rams taking on the Seahawks, and we'll have to see if Jared Goff's ready. Though John Wolford, the backup quarterback for LA, he hadn't played John Wolford had not played. He was a AAFA guy, in that league that folded last year. He had never taken a snap in the NFL, but he led the Rams to a win over Arizona last week, and they got in the playoffs. But I think Jared Goff should be ready. He had surgery on his thumb. He followed through, and he hurt his thumb 2 weeks ago, and he had surgery. He should be ready to go. But the Rams defense, Aaron Donald at defensive tackle might be, I think, is the best defensive tackle in the game. And now when they played the Cowboys earlier in the year, he threw Connor Williams into a play, just threw Connor Williams aside like he was nothing. So Aaron Donald can wreak a lot of havoc. Seahawks are 12-4. And normally I would say they're an overwhelming favorite at home with the Legion of Boom. There's no fans there. That kind of evens up the field a little bit more. I've got Seattle by 7-10. I still think Seattle will take that game. The Rams have played, their defense has really helped them down the stretch. This is the third year that they made the playoffs out of Sean McVay's 4 years as head coach. Sean McVay is a very good coach. I think they'll come up short against Seattle in that second game because Seattle has got, again, Russell Wilson's been playing some great ball. Their defense is not the Legion of Boom that we remember back in the day. DK Metcalf at receiver, that guy is going to be, he already is. So I think the Seahawks have the edge in that game, and I'll go with them. I'll take the Seahawks against the Rams in that second game.
I agree with you. Russell Wilson's going to be the difference. I don't think the Rams quarterback situation is going to get any better. The only way the Rams have any chance to stay in that game is because their defense. The defense will probably keep it close. But with that saying, I would say go with I'm going with Seattle all the way on this one. So let's go to the third game.
Third game is Tampa Bay will go to Washington. Now, we mentioned Tampa Bay a couple weeks ago, and they got their ship righted against Detroit. They hadn't been playing very good, and all of a sudden, Tom Brady's finding receivers. And we mentioned Chris Godwin. We mentioned Mike Evans. Antonio Brown had 11 catches for over 137, I believe, on Sunday. Rob Gronkowski, we mentioned. But here's the thing. Mike Evans went out with a knee injury on Sunday. Results of the MRI aren't in. If Mike Evans is unavailable, that's big. Mike Evans is a stretch the field guy, over the top guy. So if they don't have him, that's big for Tampa Bay. So we'll see. But here's what I'm going to say: Chase Young and Montez Sweat, defensive ends, have been excellent for Washington. Now, if they can get pressure on Brady, that game could be a little closer than people think. I've got Tampa Bay by probably a touchdown. I'll go with Tampa Bay. Washington have played good, had played well, and they lost a couple in a row when they went to Haskins, and Alex Smith came in and righted the ship on Sunday. But their defense is something to watch out. The pressure from those ends there, Montez Sweat has blocked about, I don't know how many passes he's blocked. He's got the arms, they rushed up the field. How good is Chase Young? And Brady really doesn't like pressure coming up the middle. So those guys are rushing on the end, and if they can keep Brady upright, I've got Tampa Bay winning that by anywhere from 7 to 10 points. But if Washington can force some turnovers, and again, Tampa Bay not having Mike Evans, that might be a little bit, we'll see. I still have Tampa Bay in that game, though.
They got Antonio Brown. He's a difference maker. And you're right. Chase Young is a great defensive lineman for the Washington. I want to call them the Redskins, but to me, they're still the Redskins. But anyway, with that saying, Alex Smith still has calf problems. They say he's 50-50 health-wise, so he's not going to be full strength. I believe Tampa Bay wins this game by 2 touchdowns. I'm going with Tampa Bay all the way on this ball game. Even if what's his name is out of the game, I still think they've got enough weapons to win it. But you're right. Washington, if they start getting some more offensive players, they're going to be a good team in the future. They've got probably the best defensive. They've got 4 first round choices at the defensive tackles and guards. So I think they're going to be a force in the future. And I wouldn't be surprised they get a couple sacks on them. You know what I mean?
I think they said the other day that Washington is a quarterback away from being dominant. Now, Alex Smith is a good game manager. You mentioned he has that calf issue. People don't understand how calves, people think it's not a big deal. It is. When you try to plant, you try to move, it's like a little knife in your calf. You can't really function. Now he's got a full week of treatment, and they treat you 24/7. And you know what? Let's mention the comeback player of the year is without a question Alex Smith. He almost had his right leg amputated, and he still went out there and played quarterback and got the Redskins in the playoffs. So I've got Tampa Bay in that game. I think you're right. I've got them 7 to 10 points, but I think if that defensive front can put pressure. Now Brady can't escape. We know that he cannot. He hates pressure up the middle. He can't. But you give him time to throw. You see what he's done the last 4 weeks. And now, he's also gotten used to that offense more over the top than it was timing offense in New England, 8 yards and a button hook, and boom, the ball's there. He's gotten used to going down the field now. So I think he's dangerous. He can put the points on the board. The man has six Super Bowl titles. 6.
All right.
So, yeah.
So let's go to Sunday. So far, you and I have agreed on every one of these games. So let's go to the first game on Sunday,
which is Chicago, New Orleans, and you know what? New Orleans, I've got to go. Their defense is pretty darn good too. And one thing they were saying, you and I mentioned this about Drew Brees last week, and they're saying that more than likely he's going to retire. But him and Taysom Hill are that's a dynamite 1-2 punch at quarterback. Now again, Drew Brees has been a little. Troy Aikman mentioned that coming out on 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 5 sometimes for Taysom Hill. I'm sure he's your ego. You don't want to come out, but they've been a pretty good 1-2 punch at quarterback. Alvin Kamara, they don't know about his availability for the playoff. I'm not sure. I haven't heard. He sat out last week's game, and I think 3 of their running backs had to sit out because they had contact with Alvin Kamara. They went with Ty Montgomery, the former Green Bay running back. He gave about 80 yards. That wasn't bad. So, I'll tell you, Chicago had a resurgence. And Mitch Trubisky, the press was all over him earlier in the year. They lost 6 in a row. 6 in a row they lost. And they came back to make the playoffs. Now, I'm going to take the Saints in that game. I still think they're the better team. But Chicago, don't go to sleep on that resurgence when everybody buried them, and they came back and made the playoffs. I'll take New Orleans by a touchdown. I've got New Orleans there by a touchdown.
Well, this could be my upset special. I think the Bears, Aaron Rodgers had to play a perfect game last Sunday, and he just tore off the Bears, But I think the Bears defense are there. They can run the football. If Kravinsky don't make critical mistakes, I think it's going to be a lot closer game. And the Bears got the defense to play with the Saints, and they control the ball with their running attack and Travinsky. So this could be an upset special. I would give a slight edge to the Saints, but this could be one of the best games on Sunday. I really believe the matchup is really good defensively for both teams. And the Bears can run. So I give a slight edge, but this could be a really good game. So let's go to game number 2 on Sunday.
That's Baltimore and Tennessee. That's a rematch of last year's game where Derrick Henry ran for 250, and he became one of the I don't know how many players. Eric Dickerson, O.J. Simpson. I thought Jamal Lewis maybe not gained 2,000 yards for a season. Derrick Henry, we always mention strong running games. You barely mention Tannehill, the quarterback for Tennessee, is a game manager, because Derrick Henry, the burst, the strength through the line, he's running incredible. So Baltimore, they lost to Tennessee last year. It's a rematch of last year's playoff game. And Baltimore, they talk about Lamar Jackson, how good he is. He's had some ups and downs. Is this the game that gets him? People question. Remember, he was the MVP last year. He played really well, but then they lost to Tennessee, and a lot of people are saying his passing when they need to make a throw, he's not that guy. So I'll tell you, Marty, to me, that one's a toss-up. I'm gonna say Baltimore's gonna win by a field goal. But Tennessee, with the way they're running the ball, if Baltimore doesn't stop Derrick Henry, and so far, who has, it's going to be a long day for the Ravens.
So here's the key of this ball game. Derrick Henry, they got to get the running game going. Their defense is not going to stop Baltimore. Baltimore is going to put 30 points on the board, okay? So the only way that Tennessee wins, and they didn't do it against the Browns. They couldn't get they got behind so quickly in that game, they could never get to the rushing attack. They've got to get points on the board. They got to keep Lamar Jackson off the field. And believe me, this is going to be a close game. I say this game could be 35-33, 38-35. There's going to be some points scored. Now, you saw what Shawan Watson did with Houston. They put up a lot of points up against Tennessee. So it's going to come down. And let me tell you right now, Lamar Jackson, when he gets this game going, nobody can stop him. The Browns couldn't stop him. Nobody. So this might be the best entertaining game on Sunday by far. And it is close to a toss-up. And you might give it. Now, I do believe that the Lamar Jackson has Hollywood Brown. He has Mark Andrews. They have a good running attack. They might have more weapons maybe than Tennessee. But let me tell you what Henry's put up. Only 8 guys in the history of the National Football League has rushed for 2,000 yards. And he's averaging, now last Saturday and the last 2 Sundays, he's averaging between 30 to 34 carries a game. And that's probably what he's going to have against Baltimore to keep them off the field. So this is going to be a great game. I agree with you. They'll come down to a field goal, maybe the last play of the game. What do you think?
Now, you would think that Baltimore head coach Jim Harbaugh, they're going to stack the line and make somebody else beat them. But Derrick Henry has been that good. Once he gets into the secondary, I told you earlier in the year, he stiff-armed Josh Norman and threw him aside like he was a baby. That guy's got the strength, the power, the speed. He right now is the best back in the league. There's no question about it. So I still have Baltimore by a field goal. But I'll tell you, you're right about Jackson. But remember, last year's game, he failed to come up with the big throws that, a lot of people were on him about that. He had an MVP season, but he didn't look good against Tennessee. And we'll see. Again, he is a great player, phenomenal player when he's running the ball and passing the way. And you mentioned the weapons he has. He does have a lot of weapons there.
Is that game in Tennessee or is it in Baltimore?
I think it's in Baltimore.
So anyway, that's going to be, I think, the best game maybe on Sunday, the most interesting one. Okay, and so I agree with you. I'm going to watch that one, and we'll see. Now, if they stop the rushing attack of Tennessee loses maybe by 3 touchdowns. So Tennessee has to rush the ball. Very important because they got behind the Cleveland Browns and they couldn't get back in the game. They're just not a passing team. They've got to, and they've been throwing the ball less than 40 passes, so they got to rush the ball. And Henry's been running 33 to 34 carries. That's a lot, but that's probably what it's going to take. So let's get to the last game on Sunday. That's going to be the evening game, and this is the game that I really want to watch. But as we came on live here, we've got some new development with the Browns, and why don't you tell the audience what it is?
Coach Stevnoski for Cleveland tested positive. The head coach, he's unavailable. A lineman, I can't remember his name, and a receiver have a Pro Bowl lineman, Pro Bowl center. He's not going to be available. And a wide receiver, I don't remember his name either, but he's not
Hodges.
Okay, yeah, Hodges. He's unavailable. So I'll tell you one thing that happened to them. A couple of weeks ago, or just 2 weeks ago, Coach Stevnoski had to go through some walkthroughs with linemen in the parking lot because 4 of their linemen were out because of COVID-19 protocols. So now you got the head coach out, which is huge. So the assistants are going to have to take over, and then you got a Pro Bowl lineman out. And so I have Pittsburgh probably anyway by probably about a touchdown. Pittsburgh slumped down the stretch. The only thing that stopped the bleeding was when they beat Indianapolis 28-24. They almost lost that game. They lost 3 in a row. So they're 1-4, 1-3 their last 4. And I they hadn't run the ball well. Ben Roethlisberger finally opened up the offensive game against Indianapolis. They were saying that he was dinking and dunking. A lot of people are wondering about that surgically repaired elbow. But I'll still say, and you know what? Cleveland, give them credit. They beat Pittsburgh last week. They had to go down to the wire to do it, and Ben Roethlisberger didn't play. And Cleveland, they gutted it out. They've got a running game with Hunt and Chubb. If they get that going, they can control the ball and keep the ball out of Pittsburgh's hand. They could win, but I've got the Steelers. I've got the Steelers by about 7 points.
I'm going with the Browns because they're going to get their 2 linebackers they didn't have last week. Their starting safety. They've got Ward. They're maybe one of the best cornerbacks. They didn't have him in the last game. They did lose Hodges. They lose that offensive lineman. And if the other guys come back, if all those guys are supposed to come back, now the problem is the head coach is not going to be calling the plays. They're going to go. There won't be a bunch of coaches there. That could be a effect of the game. I think Baker's playing really well. Baker, this is a game that puts him on the map if he could beat Big Ben. Now it's hard to go against. It's hard to go against Big Ben in Pittsburgh, but this could be. I think the Browns got a chance. Now if they don't turn it over and they can run the football, I think they have maybe more weapons. But I'll tell you what, this is going to be one of the best games. This is the second best game on Sunday, but definitely it's going to be how the Browns come out and play early in the first half is going to determine this game. And of course, Big Ben, it's hard to go up against him. His record's pretty darn good. So this is another game. I'm picking the Browns in a close one. And I know most of the Vegas odds are going with the Steelers. So this is going to be a good game. So this is one that you and I are different, but it is going to be a close one.
Well, you also mentioned Cleveland defensive end Olivier Vernon unavailable.
Not going to play.
Yeah, he tore his Achilles heel. So that's another. Myles Garrett, the other defensive end. That guy's a load to deal with. He really is. But Olivier Vernon not being available for Cleveland hurts.
Yeah, he had 6 or 8 sacks going into this game, and he had a sack last week against Steelers. He got to the quarterback, so that's a big loss, and so that could play into because you got to put pressure on Big Ben, and so this is going to be. I like this game, and I like the Tennessee Baltimore game. Those are 2 good games on Sunday. And of course on Saturday I still like the way the Indianapolis is playing, but the Buffalo Bills. So this is going to be fun to watch. So I would say those are the 6 games. Now with all those teams, I still think Kansas City and the Packers are the 2 best teams right now, the way they're playing. And anybody they have to go through Kansas City, and you're going to have to go through Green Bay. And you know how cold it is in Lambeau, what advantage Green Bay has, but they won't have the big crowds, but you got the weather, and the weather's the factor in those games, don't you think?
Well, I go back to the Ice Bowl. I go back to that, and this is a little, you probably, of course, remember that. I didn't get to see it. I was too young to really remember, but of course I went back and watched it, and remember the night before the game, Vince Lombardi had talked about his electric blanket field, and the field wasn't going to freeze, right? And I remember the story. George Andre woke up, the Cowboy defensive lineman. He threw a glass of water against the window and it froze. He said, and they couldn't believe how cold it was, right? So that cold there, again, Green Bay eked it out on Starr's 1-yard sneak, right, with 14 seconds left. And so, yes, and by the way, the electric blanket of the field froze, didn't work, right? So the advantage that they always say when you have to go through Lambeau Field, and look at the way Rodgers is playing. I can't believe, the Packers drafted Duval Love. Nothing against Duval Love. He's a fine player, but you're almost acting like Aaron Rodgers is through, and he's not. Look how well he's played.
So he's thrown for 48 touchdowns this year. He has the highest QB rating in the last 15 years. He's had an incredible year. So here he is, 38, 39 years old? How old is he now? 39?
38.
So I'd say those are the 2 teams. And of course, next week's show on American Talk It Up, we'll have a breakdown in the, I guess you call it the semifinals? No, the quarterfinals.
Right.
So we'll find out more about that. So we've got to talk about our sponsors. I want to thank Everguard Roofing and Solar. They've been great. If you need solar or any kind of roofing, really call Everguard Roofing. Then Extreme Clean. Now, they've been around for a long time, almost 29, 30 years. They're the best carpet cleaning company, commercially and residential. If you go up to their website, they do have specials. So check them out. And then I want to thank Jimmy Tran and his company Zoc Pro, and then I want to thank ProView Networks for letting us come on channel 26. And by the way, if you want, just type in Route 66 takeout on the Mother Road, and there's all these restaurants have these takeouts and specials, then you might want to check that out. So really check out our sponsors. So let's get to the last segment here. Let's talk about Monday night for the national championship game between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Alabama. I guess you call it the rolling tide, right, Ed?
Yeah. Hey, you know what? When I watched Notre Dame and Alabama on Saturday, to me, it's a physical mismatch every time they play. Now, the Tide beat them in 2013, 52-13 for the championship. And, I watched the game, and Notre Dame with Brian Kelly, they're a good team. But I'm talking about the physical mismatches. They're just not fast enough. They're not strong enough. They're not good enough to beat Alabama. And that's not a knock against Notre Dame. That's telling you how good Alabama is. The Alabama probably could have scored 48, 50 points. I thought they took the gas off a little bit. They scored the first 3 times they had the ball. And, and again, Ian Book is a good quarterback for Notre Dame. He's good. But they got Mac Jones, Devontae Smith. I mean, they've just got so many guys that in the defense, those guys are athletes. They explode. They've got explosive players. They've got the speed. They've got the strength. So that, to me, that game was a mismatch. I watched it, but no, I didn't think Notre Dame had much of a chance, and they did.
They didn't. So let's talk about Ohio State, what they did at Clemson. They probably played. Now they only had 6 games that year. They only played 6 games, but we knew that Justin Fields was a good quarterback. He's been inconsistent all year, but we've seen times when he just looked great. And of course, I tell you what, on New Year's Day, he threw 6 touchdowns. He played probably the best game that you could probably play on a college football game. Now, the question is, can he come back and repeat that? Because he's been inconsistent, and that's going to be the story of Ohio State. But they had that kid from Oklahoma, Solomon. He's rushed for almost 500 and some yards in 2 games. And Ohio State defense really showed up. So this is going to be an interesting game. I'm rooting for the Buckeyes, but I tell you what, I just don't know if Justin Field could come back and duplicate what he did. Now, if he did, they're going to beat Alabama because that was a great quarterback performance, don't you think? I just don't think they could do it 2 games in a row.
Well, he's banged up. He's banged up, and I don't know if it was a groin that he hurt because he was on the sideline wincing, and then he went out and threw a 50-yard touchdown pass. Now, Coach Day said he will play on Monday, and there's no way he's going to sit that out unless he can't walk, right? But Alabama is just so darn good, man. Now, I'd like to see Ohio State win, but Alabama they execute in offense, defense, and special teams. All 3 phases of the game. That's how good they are. Then they've got the best coach in college football, one of the top coaches in college football history, no doubt. So I as much as I might want Ohio State, I got to go with Alabama.
Well, Ohio State shows they can run the football. And so Alabama's going to have to stop the run. And Justin Field can get on the edge and throw the football. The thing that impressed me, Ohio State put 3 tight ends. They've got a 3 tight end offense, and they've got some players, and they got that one kid who the wide receiver didn't play much in the game against Northwestern, but he had 2 long receptions. This is going to be an interesting game. I do think Justin Field has the talent, but think about it. Have you ever seen a guy come back the next week and throw 6 touchdowns again? That's a lifetime achievement award for one game. 6 touchdowns and a rushing touchdown for a quarterback.
Well, especially against Alabama. But I'll say this: that Clemson, Dabo Swinney kind of gave them some, bulletin board material by putting the Buckeyes at number 11 in his poll. And I'll tell you, the Ohio State, I kept thinking, okay, Clemson's going to come back. And then in the 4th quarter, when they go up 49-21, and I'm like, my wife and I are like, that game's over. Clemson's not coming back.
So I think Dabo, he's a fellowship of Christian athlete. He's a fine coach, but he definitely gave bulletin report. If I would have, and if you watched that interview they had on the ESPN, and he just kept saying, I'm not going to change the mind. They're the 11th best team, and that's how I'm going to pick them, blah, blah, blah. I think that if you watch that video and I was an Ohio State football player, I would have been upset. I'm going to go prove him wrong. And I think he probably shouldn't have done it, but he did,
You know what? Dabo Swinney has won some national championships. That's the way he felt. But you're right. If I ever said or thought I heard somebody say anything about my team, even when I played for Hyden, it fired me up. Now, emotion can only carry you so far. You have to execute. And boy, did Ohio State, especially when they needed it, because Clemson did come back just for a minute. And I was kind of on the edge of my seat, like, okay. And then Ohio State went down the field and scored again. That was it.
So, 98% of the time, Ohio State is the favorite. They're the ones everybody has to beat. But they went into this game as the big underdogs, or, oh, they're not going to win. Even before the game started, 5 minutes before kickoff, they usually have that pregame show with announcers, and they ask them who's going to win. Not one of them picked Ohio State. Oh, Clemson's going to win. And that just shows you how good. Now, Ohio State, remember, they've only played 7 games, and they're still. I think they still got a lot in the tank. So, but I just don't think Justin Fields is going to put that kind of performance on Alabama. I think he'll do all right. So this is going to be a good game. I'm thinking Alabama is going to win by 10 points. I think it's not going to be close, but I think it's going to be 10 points. What do you think, Ed?
Well, you know what? You just mentioned it. You're looking at a banged up Fields, right? And so Alabama head coach Nick Saban is going to put the hurt on the guy, man. He's going to try not to literally hurt him, but you know what I mean? It's like, hey, this guy's banged up, man. Let's make sure he knows we're around. They're going to hit him every time they get a chance. And I think the game's going to be about big plays early. If Fields can make some big plays early and keep that Alabama defense at bay, then they might have a chance. The running back, Seaman, you mentioned, he had some great runs last week. He really did. So if Ohio State can score and keep Alabama's offense, that offense of Alabama comes in, Mac Jones, Devontae Smith. I mean, those guys score at will. They really do.
And I think that Devontae Smith's going to get the Heisman Trophy. He's my choice right now, the way he's been playing. I think he's the one that's going to win the Heisman, the guy from Alabama, Devontae
Smith. He was the Associated Press something recently, college player of the year. So, yes, I think he's got a very good chance.
So, with that saying, we've got the national championship game. I do think, Ed, believe it or not, I think the 2 best teams are playing right now.
I think you're right. The argument was made against Ohio State about the number of games, but you're right. They proved it. Now, if Clemson had beaten them and, Dabo, they had backed up Dabo's boast, and I thought Clemson was going to win it. I had called Clemson. I called Clemson over Alabama, and Ohio State got in there. They deserve it. They played a full football game and beating Clemson. Now they're going to have to have their hands full with Alabama. I don't, like you said, can Fields put together 2 games like that? Probably not. But I'm going to have to go with the tie on that game.
And if you do the eyeball test, I don't think Texas A&M is better than Ohio State if you watch the 2 teams. But I think unless kudos to Texas A&M, they had a great season this year. They really did. The Aggies from college.
No, they did. They had a very good season. They're right there on the cusp of a playoff berth. And they had a very, very good season.
And I'll tell you what, my Oklahoma Sooners, let's do this. I think they're going to be in the top 4-3 preseason. They've got all those young players coming back, and I think they're going to be. And their defense is finally getting good. I mean, that was the knock on OU, is they couldn't stop anybody. They could score 40 points. So next year could be a year Oklahoma makes a run for the national title. But with that saying, it's been the weirdest, probably the most unusual football season I've ever seen in my lifetime. And we both agree we'll probably never see. I hope we never see a season like this again. I hope it never happens in my lifetime, right, Ed? And it's been tough. Yeah. To a lot of teams. How many football games have been canceled? God, I feel for these coaches. The one thing you can say about our University of Mexico Lobos, maybe that isolation in Las Vegas saved them for the season, because they didn't have any positive in the 5 weeks they were up there in Nevada. So that was good.
I don't think the Lobo basketball team has had any positives either. And you know what? I'm going to say this again, bring the Aggies, bring the Lady Lobos, the Lady Aggies, bring them home, bring them back to New Mexico. They have no business playing in Arizona, in Lubbock Christian. Nothing against those fine facilities. They're thank you for lending us, lending the facilities to the Lobos. They belong in Albuquerque. They belong in Las Cruces. Bring them home. Bring them home. Bring them home. There's no reason for that.
I mean, I was watching Oklahoma play West Virginia, and then they had the girls' game, and they had about 1,000 people in the gym. They had everybody 6 feet away wearing masks. Every school's doing it. Texas Tech, all those schools are playing their games. Nevada, everybody in the Mountain West except us. And you're right, Ed. This is ridiculous that we have to play in Levittown, Texas, and Canyon, Texas, where the girls are. This is crazy. Bring them home. This is ridiculous. And Governor, if you're watching the show, I love you. I mean, you're a good woman. I have nothing against you personally, but maybe you need to let us get our teams back just for the morale of New Mexico. And I think we can control that virus. If other schools are doing it, Ed, we could do the same thing.
I think what one of the things again, people have had to make decisions. President Trump, Mayor Keller, Governor DeSantis in Florida, they've had to make decisions and tough ones, very hard ones. It's not, saying that though they've been very hard decisions to make because you're affecting a lot of people. But you know what? Here's my thing with New Mexico. You and I've lived in. I'm 504. New Mexican to the end. I've lived all 58 years in New Mexico, and I'm not moving. I'm going to retire. I already did and die here someday, right? This is my home state.
Just make sure your wife invites me to your funeral, okay, Ed? I'll be there for you.
Yeah, hopefully by then we can attend, right? Hopefully by then we can attend. But my thing is this. Okay, we said this. We understand. Maybe we don't sometimes why the lockdown. Some of us don't understand it, right? The restaurants have really taken some huge hits. Now the numbers went down the other day. The numbers went considerably down. And it's up to us. We understand to eradicate mass social distancing. But you know what? Let them try. Let the kids try. Now I'm not one to sit there and say just go crazy with no guidelines. I didn't say that. We have to be safe. And of course I have lives. I'm concerned about that. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm not. Of course I am. All I'm saying, yeah.
I agree with you. So anyway, I think we're in agreement on that. We need to bring the teams back.
Bring them home. Bring the Lobos and the Aggies. And we're not Aggie guys, but you know what? They play in this state, man. They're from the New Mexico. They belong playing at the Pan Am Center. They belong in Las Cruces. Bring them home.
And Western New Mexico and Eastern, they're playing some games right now. They need to bring them back home. So anyway, listen, we've got a few minutes left. What's your thoughts of the Lobos right now? Of course, it's hard to analyze the Lobos because of the lack of practice, Jim. The only thing that's bothers me is they've got a bunch of athletes, but they don't seem to have too many skill shooters and people, and then free throws. And I've talked to many old coaches. The best way to get fired is to have a bunch of athletes on your team. If you don't have skilled players, you're not going to win. And right now, the Lobos don't seem to have anybody that can really shoot the ball very well besides McGee, and he doesn't get enough shots. So anyway.
No, you know what? You make a good point. And Malawach can shoot. He's probably the only guy that can really create his own shot, but he didn't play well. The last 2 games, he hadn't played well. The other guy I keep telling you about, and I don't want anybody to think I'm just blaming him, what I'm really looking at is Jeremiah Francis, who came from North Carolina. I'm thinking like, okay, he played at Carolina and played minutes at North Carolina. So I keep looking for that special, like, oh, wow. And I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen it. Now, Rod Brown plays hard. Saquon Singleton, there's no doubt they play hard. They play hard. But I'm with you. I told my son, I said, son, I don't see anybody that can really shoot or dribble. And then the free throw shooting is atrocious. It's horrible. Now, here's the other thing. They can't really blame the coach. Now, Coach Weir has 3 former head coaches, Coach Dan McHale, Coach Scott Padgett, Coach Dave Filipovich, and I believe Rod Brown. So 4 former head coaches of their own program. So he's got a great staff there. But like you said, I just don't. The players right now. Let's give them another 2-3 weeks, right? Because they're behind about a month in development because they couldn't really practice. So I'm still willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I got to tell you that I've seen, you know how long I've been around basketball, right? I've been around the game a long time. So when I see those things, I'm like, well, I just don't see a lot of guys that have basic basketball skills, which is kind of concerning. But I'm not giving up. I know you're not giving up. That's my team.
Well, it's my team. I'm Lobo. I'll be a Lobo fan, a Lobo lover for the day I die, just like you. And it really hurts me when we lose games when we can't shoot and we miss 23 throws. It just breaks me apart. We're better than that.
That's right.
I and of course nobody's gone. No basketball team, women's or men's, has gone what we're going through, and that's why I'm upset. Why can't we bring him back?
Bring them home.
And a kid, I got to believe if that game was played at the pit, might have been a little different, but I think the next 2 or 3 outings are going to really determine can they make some improvement. But if they don't start shooting the ball better, and then another problem they're having is their guards are falling back to help out the centers, and that's leaving the 3-point line open. And the teams are killing us from the 3-point line for the last 3 games I've watched. And we're going back. They're good in help. The guards are backing off and helping the centers. And the ball goes inside. And so I tell you what, right now we're just getting too many 3 looks, and a good shooting team's going to kill us. And that's the only reason I think we lost Nevada because we didn't stop the 3. We probably would have won that game. We played good enough, maybe win that game.
Hmm?
The 3s killed us. So that's going to be something to watch. And I'm hoping we can get a game that you and I don't know if I'm going to go until I ever get a vaccine, but if that ever happens, I sure love to get back to the pit and watch the Lobos play before the season ends, if that is possible. I don't know if it is.
You know what? Maybe it's not possible that we get to go watch them, but you know what? Here's what I'm going to say one more time. Bring them home. Bring the Lobos home. Bring the Lady Lobos home. Bring the Aggies home. Bring the Lady Aggies home. Bring them home.
I bet you, Ed, if we did a scientific poll, I mean a real scientific poll, and asked that question around New Mexico, I bet you we get an 85% positive reply.
Yeah, bring them home, man. It's ridiculous.
It's a no-brainer. And if I was the governor, I know this is an issue that there'll be people who might not want to vote for her because she did this. I think if I was her political advisor, I would say, hey, ease up, let's get him home. And if something does get out of control, then she can always put the clamps on. Okay. She can always do that. So I think politically, I think it's a bad move if she keeps on going like this, because people are frustrated. The average fans are. And so maybe she's listened to our show. Maybe she's probably not, but if she is, Governor, bring them home. Bring the teams home.
Yeah, bring them home.
All New Mexicans, for all the people of this state that loves basketball. Basketball's in our DNA. The Native Americans, the Pueblo Indians, the Navajos, the Apaches, the Comanche, all the Native Americans, the Hispanic community up north, Reba, Espanol. We love basketball in the state, and it's killing us when we don't see our Lobos at home. Right, Ed? We got to.
You know what? Bring them home. I'm a full support of that. They don't belong in Lubbock Christian. Bring them home.
And we and you and I know that majority, I would say maybe more than 80% would say bring them home. So anyway, we'll see how this plays out. This is the first week of the year. We've got January is going to be an interesting month, Ed, and our future shows. And folks, please support our sponsors, Everguard Roofing and Solar, Extreme Cleaning. And by the way, Ed, if people want to check us out on Facebook, please go up to Facebook, American Talk It Up, hit the like button, and go up to YouTube and hit follow on YouTube. And then we're on channel 26, 8 o'clock every Thursday night. If you got cable TV, thanks for ProView Networks. And Ed, you got a final statement for our first show of the year?
You know what? Just wish everybody a happy 2021 and look forward to better things this year. Just move 2020 in the rearview mirror. Happy New Year, everybody.
And Happy New Year, folks. And Ed, I can't wait for the next couple shows. And we're going to be following all these things we've been talking about, the getting the virus out, the vaccine. That's going to be a big thing, I think, in the month of January. So, folks, keep watching us. Ed and I, we're old New Mexicans, but we've been around a long time, and we're in touch. So hopefully, folks, God bless you. And we'll see you next time on American Talk It Up.